Throughout the 20th century, stories about the Grand Duchess Anastasia, yes, that Anastasia, ran rampant. In 1922, a mysterious woman turned up in a hospital claiming to be the lost Princess Anastasia. The youngest Romanov girl was long thought dead, but when the family visited, they were chilled to the bone. Born into the doomed Romanov family on June 18, 1901, the Grand Duchess Anastasia's birth was an utter disappointment to her parents, Tsar Nicholas II and Tsarina Alexandra. Pressured to produce a male heir, little Anastasia was their fourth girl. This left her father so distraught that he needed to take a long walk to cool off before even seeing his wife and daughter. And Auntie Zania's exact words were, "My God, what a disappointment. A fourth girl." It was a sad beginning for Anastasia, but her troubles were only just beginning. Although a young princess, Anastasia wasn't exactly pampered or spoiled. Unless your idea of spoiled involved sleeping on uncomfortable beds without any pillows and beginning every morning with a nice cold bath, followed by some cleaning and needlework. With her startling blue eyes and blonde hair, Anastasia was known not only for her infectious charm and her prevailing sense of humor, but also her penchant for pranks. Many witnessed her tripping the servants, climbing trees, and meddling with her tutors. On one disturbing occasion, the young Anastasia hit a rock inside of a snowball and whipped it at her sister Tatiana, who herself went down like a rock. But, of course, Anastasia's rebellious nature didn't end there. Although raised behind palace walls, Anastasia had a free spirit and thought little of the trappings of beauty and royal appearances. When she was 10, old enough to know better, the princess settled into her seat at the St. Petersburg Opera House and did the unthinkable. With her flawless white gloves still on, she began indulging in chocolates. But for all her bratty inclinations, Anastasia also suffered behind closed doors. Anastasia's health wasn't always as robust as it seemed. The Grand Duchess's feet were in constant pain due to the pulsing bunions on her big toes, and because she had a very weak back, was forced to endure frequent massages, which she absolutely despised. Anastasia may have even been a carrier of the royal disease hemophilia, a condition where a low blood clotting factor could result in excessive bleeding. It was nicknamed as such for being prevalent in European royal families, particularly those related to Queen Victoria, which Anastasia was. But only one of Anastasia's siblings was a certain victim. 3 years after her disappointing arrival, the Romanovs' dreams finally came true when Anastasia and her sisters welcomed bouncing baby boy Alexei to the family. With an heir apparent to the throne finally secured, came a huge sigh of relief. But sadly, the royal family's excitement quickly turned to horror. After cutting Alexei's umbilical cord, he wouldn't stop bleeding. Worried about their sickly male heir, the Romanovs eventually turned to a healer for help and made a controversial friend. Anastasia's mother sought the healing powers of Grigory Rasputin. Yes, that Rasputin, a Russian peasant and holy man. Rasputin soon became entrenched in Anastasia and her siblings' lives. The young princesses even came to know the bearded man as our friend. Anastasia and her siblings were completely at ease with Rasputin, but perhaps they were too comfortable. In 1910, Rasputin had been seen visiting the nursery while the girls were dressed in their nightgowns. Utterly distressed, one of the governesses, Sofia Ivanovna, wanted him banned from the nursery. Eventually, the Romanovs fired the governess, and she took her disturbing story on the road. Although Rasputin's relations with the girls were by all other accounts innocent, this dirty laundry caused quite the stink, and it would only pile up. In the spring of 1910, another governess came forward, claiming that the family's good friend Rasputin had taken advantage of her. Despite all of this, there seemed to be a chasm separating the Romanovs' opinion of the holy men and these terrified governnesses' experiences. Anastasia's mother refused to believe these accusations, insisting that everything Rasputin does is holy. Eventually, even little Anastasia got caught in the middle as obscene cartoons involving Rasputin and the four Grand Duchesses began circulating. This scandal would be the last straw and forced Anastasia's father to order him into exile. But despite the many accusations against the holy man, her family didn't exactly cut all ties. In fact, they continued to support him until his murder on December 17, 1916. And Anastasia and her family all signed their names on an icon that Rasputin took to his grave. Unfortunately, the loss of Rasputin wasn't the only heartbreak the family dealt with at the time. World War I had turned Anastasia's life upside down, as it did to so many others. Too young to become Red Cross nurses, she and her sister Maria managed to contribute in their own special way by bringing her fun-loving attitude into the hospitals and playing games with the wounded officers. She certainly made a lasting impression. One of the patients in the hospital vividly remembered the Grand Duchess, most notably her bubbly nature. Felix Dell recalled Anastasia had a laugh like a squirrel, and she cast a sliver of sunshine across the shadow of loss. Despite this bit of good karma, Anastasia and her family would have to fight a war of their own at home, as the events of World War I helped usher in the Russian Revolution. Tsar Nicholas's poor leadership had finally come around to haunt him, and his family would suffer greatly for it. You see, after Russia had joined World War I, its people suffered extensive casualties and brutal food shortages. With suffering, grief, and poverty ravaging the Russians, it wasn't long before its victims turned an accusatory eye to their leader. In February 1917, the Russian people revolted, and eventually, Anastasia's father had no choice but to abdicate his throne. Now, the entire Romanov family was in more danger than ever before. Placed under house arrest, guards tracked their every move. In such a short amount of time, Anastasia's home at the Alexander Palace had become her prison. Not only had the revolution turned Anastasia's world topsy-turvy, but in January of the same year, she and her siblings came down with a frightful case of measles. Sadly, the medicine they used to treat measles caused their hair to fall out. So, the Grand Duchesses shaved their heads bald in the spring, believing it would help their hair return. Of course, considering the chilling nature of their captivity, baldness was the least of Anastasia's worries, and beauty took a back seat to survival. With the revolution heating up and the encroachment of the Bolsheviks, the Romanovs had no choice but to evacuate. Anastasia and her family found a new home in Tobolsk, Siberia, and they lived a rather peaceful, although surveilled existence for a few months. On March 1, 1918, Anastasia lost some of her royal privileges. 10 servants promptly lost their jobs. She and the rest of her family switched to soldiers' rations, and they had to forfeit such delicacies as coffee and butter, which honestly might have been worse than losing the servants. After the Bolsheviks seized majority control of Russia, they were moved to Yekaterinburg and were held captive at the Apatyov house. If the town had any counter-revolutionary sentiments, the entire Romanov family faced execution. It was the beginning of the last and darkest chapter of Anastasia's life. During captivity, Anastasia and her family lost all of their privileges, and the rules were brutally severe. Any belongings that weren't confiscated couldn't be accessed freely. They weren't allowed to speak any languages other than Russian. Her entire family had their titles stripped, and the servants addressed them by their common names only, and a 4-m-high palisade surrounded the property, keeping the entire family hidden from view. All of the rooms her family occupied were sealed. There was only a single source of ventilation, a fortka in Anastasia's bedroom. Although they were all strictly forbidden from looking out of it, the rebellious Anastasia decided to peek out of it anyways. The second her little head appeared, a sentry took aim and fired at her. Luckily, she dodged the bullet. Clearly, the captivity had started taking a mighty toll on the Romanovs. Desperate for a slice of freedom, Anastasia's parents asked for some of the windows to be unsealed. On high alert, the guards kept an even closer eye on the family once they unsealed 2 windows in the Tsar and Serena's quarters. However, just like Anastasia, if they made any attempt to signal or poke their heads out, they'd be shot at. No longer permitted to live like czars, the family had no contact with the outside world, and couldn't even go to the bathroom without ringing a bell. Unfortunately, Anastasia's mother, Alexandra, had a habit of standing close to the open window, and so an iron grill had to be implemented. Anastasia's fall from princess to prisoner made her old life seem like a distant and blissful memory. On July 17, 1918, at around midnight, the family doctor Eugene Bodkin shook Anastasia and her family awake and told them to dress as quickly as possible. The Grand Duchess couldn't believe her ears. The city had erupted into chaos, and they had to move to the basement for their safety. Anastasia followed her family into the cramped basement and stood with her sisters as a guard informed them that a truck had arrived to carry them to an even safer location. But this was a blatant lie. As a group of guards filled into the basement, one of them brandished a piece of paper, and its contents were the last words the Romanovs ever heard. Nikolai Alexandrovich, in view of the fact that your relatives are continuing their attack on Soviet Russia, the Ural Executive Committee has decided to execute you. Anastasia watched as her father scanned the faces of his family in panic. Her mother and sister tried to bless themselves, but the deafening sound of the firing cut them short. The tiny basement flooded with smoke and dust, eliminating all visibility. Behind the veil, however, the nightmare had only just begun. When the smoke cleared, the bodies of the Romanovs painted a disturbing tableau. Nicholas and Alexandra passed almost immediately, while Anastasia and her siblings were still breathing. Earlier, the Romanovs came up with a brilliant plan to smuggle the family jewels by sewing the diamonds into their clothing. And it was Anastasia, Tatiana, and Maria who carried the most. Although it protected them from the flying bullets, it eliminated their chances of a quick end, instead lasting about 20 grueling minutes. Once the deed was finally done, Anastasia and her family were taken to an abandoned mine shaft in the forest. They were stripped of their belongings, including ambulance with a prayer and photo of Rasputin. Guards then used sulfuric acid to render them unrecognizable. But not all of the Romanovs ended up together. See, Alexei and one of his sisters did not take a final tumble down the mine shaft. The guards separated them intentionally, hoping if anyone searching for the royal family came upon the gravesite, the missing children would throw them off. And this is how the mystery of Anastasia truly began. Many believe that Anastasia escaped the execution and survived. As many as 10 women came forward claiming to be the lost princess. However, in 1922, when a woman turned up in a hospital claiming that she was the lost princess Anastasia, the family visited and were chilled to the bone. She looked just like the little princess. The woman went by the name of Anna Anderson, and even people who had known Anastasia as a girl were convinced she had somehow survived her family's brutal execution. In fact, Anna weaved a very convincing story. She claimed that she had faked her demise, lying still next to her deceased family members. That's when a merciful guard realized that the little princess still lived. According to Anderson, the guard then helped her make her dramatic escape. Her fight to be recognized as Anastasia became a long-fought battle that lasted her entire life. In 1984, Anna Anderson passed, but it wasn't until 1994 that a DNA test outed her for being the imposter she truly was. Remember how we said earlier that Anastasia was related to Queen Victoria? Well, Anderson's tissue sample did not match the blood of Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, one of Queen Victoria's great-great-grandsons. For Anderson's many supporters, this was a crushing blow, and they admitted that the DNA tests had won the day. Believe it or not, though, this story doesn't end here. Although the Romanovs' burial site had been discovered in 1981, its location was kept a secret due to communist rule in Russia. It wasn't until a decade later that it was finally excavated. According to DNA and skeletal analysis at the time, scientists claimed that Anastasia and Alexei were the two missing Romanovs, but they were mistaken. On August 23, 2007, a Russian archaeologist had discovered two burned skeletons at a bonfire site, about 50 ft from the original mass grave. The bones belonged to a boy, no doubt Alexei, as well as a girl between the ages of 18 and 23. While Anastasia had been 17 at the time of her passing, Maria had been 19. In the end, it was Maria, not Anastasia, who had been the missing princess all along. Thanks for watching History Expose. If you love uncovering the best stories in history, hit like and subscribe to Keep Exploring with Us. Don't forget to visit our main page, Factate, for more incredible facts about everything.